I don't like being this person. There's got to be some other way. At some point it was, I can't keep going with this because this just feels wrong in so many ways, but I don't know how to fix it. Maybe I've not found my right purpose. Maybe I just need to flip the table over and figure something else out, which then ushered in this era of my life where I think I tried on probably 3 or 4 careers, thinking like, this cannot possibly be it.
And someone's now listening to this and they're thinking, I got to be more purposeful with my work. I got to do something different. I know I can't keep doing this for the next 40 years. What can they do to start moving in the right direction?
Through my recruiting career, we're attuned to asking questions and understanding, what are the things that make you feel good? What are the things that you see around you that help to ensure that you're meeting your goals or that you've done well in your career? It's really understanding this idea of why do you do what you want to do? The real pivot point for me was I needed someone who believed in these questions I was asking, and that I felt like I could take on this challenge of solving some of these problems that I had rolling around in my head. And, it took an opportunity to really flex my muscles and see what I could do under the watchful eye of someone who absolutely and emphatically believed I could deliver on those things.
Do you want to share some of the things you've learned from parenting that have then taught you how to become a better leader?
The number one thing is
welcome to another episode of Success with Purpose, where we help mentor you into becoming a more successful version of yourself. We do this through giving you access to mentors you typically would never have the opportunity to connect with. We explore their journeys, their experiences, their life-changing events, their fields of expertise, and most importantly, their purpose. My name is Harry Goldberg, husband to an incredible woman, father of 2 amazing daughters, host, interviewer, and interrogator of this podcast, and director and advisor and meditation teacher of Purpose Advisory. This purpose-driven project is entirely funded by Purpose Advisory, which I am a director of. We guide clients to make great life and money decisions, and we do this through a range of different services: life vision experiences, personality, investment strategies, cash flow systems, and through teaching meditation. If you want to learn any more about any of these, link in the comments below. Now, just before we learn from yet another exceptional guest, if you find value from these conversations, please make sure to like and subscribe below, leave a review. It really does make a difference. And of course, share it with someone else who's going to find value. Now, listen in, pay attention, take some notes, enjoy. Let's begin. Abbygates, welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited for this conversation. Look, so for the listeners, you started out in recruitment in 2005, progressed your way through leadership, and you're now VP of People and Culture at Render Networks. I've got you as a self-proclaimed startup junkie, a mum of 3 daughters, and a thought leader in delivering on making work fulfilling and improving people's lives. So before we dive into your journey and how you've gotten to where you are and the lessons you've learned along the way, how do you define success?
It's a big question. I thought a lot about this before we hopped on, and I think, for me, it's a couple of things. I think, early in my career, it was driving toward an outcome for myself. It was, is it monetary success? Is it another rung in the ladder? Is it being recognized or, being adored by my colleagues or, all of those things. But I think, what I realized over time is those are, it's a series of diminishing returns is sort of what I realized. And I think, honestly, it probably took the pandemic for me to realize that there is this, level of fulfillment, of satisfaction in, making it this intersection between the things I would love to do with my career, but also bringing people along with me. I think, it's made me a bit kinder. It's made me more aware, conscientious. I won't say it's roses and rainbows and flowers, but I think the perspective that experience gave me, in that period of my adulthood really, really set the tone for how I personally define success, which is the things I want to do, but also how can I share that success with others and help them along in their journeys too.
So how does that work? What do you primarily focus on there? Is it as long as it's what I want to do and then it will help other people and then I'll do that? Or is it what's going to help other people and then I'll try and find a way that I'm going to enjoy it. Like, how do
Yeah.
you approach that particular dilemma?
Yeah, it's for me, and occupationally, and there's a nice setup here because
Mm,
everything in my line of work, which is in people and culture, is, how can we set up the best outcomes for the people at our company? And so this setup is really employing the masses. It's seeking out input from them. It's using their feedback as a guiding light for the things we'd like to do. I often say, without feedback from the team, our work means nothing. There's just, we're sort of throwing a dart at a dartboard in the dark with our eyes closed. And so, I think for me it was, we've got to make sure we bring people on that journey with us and also pull back the curtain on when we say things like people and culture, it is all of you. It is, our goal here is to make sure that there's impact here that's meaningful beyond an OKR my team is held to. So it's really like reframing, who is this benefiting? It's impact for everyone else and not for me. And through their satisfaction and their excitement to be here, I also share in that journey too, which feels better, honestly.
So do you primarily see your staff as, or people who are working in the organization that you're a leader of, as people who are there because they've got to have a job, they've got bills to pay, and they're doing something which they kind of enjoy, but then you're just focused on trying to make sure that they find it more fulfilling? Or are you trying to reorient the organization towards making sure that it's going to be fulfilling for more people to attract more of those people? Right? Which approach
Well, I
do you
think
take?
it's both of those things. If you look at the span of what my team does, it is touching on every step of the journey before someone joins our organization and even after. And
Mhm.
everything as part of that journey beforehand is understanding what are the motivating factors on either side of the table. Naturally, our organization needs X, Y, and Z for this to be
Mhm.
defined as success for, the purposes of this role. But there will be motivating factors on the candidate side, which also inform that. And so when I think about this, and in fact, one of the biggest reasons I ended up moving into this broader people and culture role was, I asked myself over a period of time, how can we deliver on that promise? Because, as a company, what we're doing is selling a promise before someone joins.
Mhm.
But then it was, there's got to be some authenticity in that process at all. How can we actually ensure that we're promising or that we're delivering on what we've promised these candidates? And so when I think about this moving forward, it's creating fulfillment by we've sort of defined those motivating factors on both sides, and how do we encourage those behaviors? How can we ensure that we're thinking about both of those factors as we move through someone's employee journey? I think it is
Mm.
possible to achieve both outcomes. Now, I won't profess to be an expert on this because I think this is the $1 million question for anyone in my capacity, but I do think there is a way to make sure that someone feels this level of love for the work they do because it, hits on the things they find satisfying.
And within your definition of success, you were referring to, uh, being able to do what you want to do while also helping other people do what they want to do too, or feel
Again,
fulfilled by what they're doing as well.
uh
And most of what you've touched on there is based on how fulfilled you are at work or what you want to do at work. Where does your personal life flow into it as well?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'd be lying if I said my personal life didn't inform this. I think, one of the things that I've set out to do in my personal life is really employ the same tactics. Like, I think about, parenthood and all the changes that's brought to my life, and, the misconceptions I had about that journey before I was a parent, and the realities once that's hit. And I think about all of the people that have helped me become a better parent or think about things in a different way, encourage me when things felt especially difficult, or, celebrating my successes. And so it is fulfilling to offer help, but also bring people along in that journey of doing the same for others. And so I think through that, I think it's probably the first time in my life where I've really looked around and thought, my gosh, like this is when people say it takes a village. This is it. Like it is imperative for me to look at the people in my life and think, there has to be some reciprocity in this relationship. There has to be some way that, we can both benefit from this relationship. And I think, thinking about that, and it has made my personal relationships flourish. It has, changed the way I think about how I engage with the people around me and my family. And it's really informed the way I show up at work now. And I think I've noticed a huge shift in the way that I present at work now versus what I might have done even 15 years ago, where, again, it was the only player in the game was me. Whereas now there's a whole team of people who are also benefiting in the work I do, and who are also informing the way I do it, so that I can have some impact beyond my own goals.
Oh, this is cool. So there are the aspects of your impact beyond your own goals, as in how you're helping other people as well. And it sounds like if you rewind 15 years, to the Abby 15 years ago, there was no reciprocity. Do you mean that you weren't helping others, or that you found yourself trying to help others and that they weren't helping you back? What do you mean by that?
Gosh, I wish it was the latter. I just don't know that I was intentional as intentional about that as I could have been. I don't know that I understood that, maybe honestly what it might have been is that, when I started working, I think my initial impressions of working in corporate America were, it's a dog eat dog world. Like if you're not looking out for yourself, then who's looking out for you? And,
Yes.
so I think like my misconception there was that, kindness or, working as part of a larger, and having some larger impact or helping others along in the journey would be mistaken for weakness. I think I really and truly thought that was sort of the way you succeed in America. I think over time it was just this like building sense of anxiety over, I don't like this. I don't like being this person. There's got to be some other way. Maybe I've not found my right purpose. Maybe I just need to flip the table over and figure something else out, which then, ushered in this era of my life where I think I tried on probably 3 or 4 careers, thinking like, this cannot possibly be it. It can't be the way I'm to spend the next 45, 50 years of my adult life. Like, who does this for ever? And I think at some point it was, I can't keep going with this because this just feels wrong in so many ways, but I don't know how to fix it. And I
Is
think
that a constant question that kind of runs up in your mind? Like if any time, like imagine like if you have almost everyone has questions which run in their mind all the time. And if you imagine that the question that keeps running in, a lot of people, that's what's wrong with this, what needs to be fixed about this, how can I make this better? Why don't people like me? Like whatever it is, the question which they keep asking themselves, it sounds like there's some element of that question of, do I want to do what I'm doing today for another 45 years? That seems to drive a lot of your decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely asked those types of questions at that point. I think now, the answer to that question is I absolutely want to be doing this work, for the next 45 years. But I think the questions are now more directed along the lines of, this feels hard. How can I solve my way out of this? There's a solution here. How can I look at this from all angles and consider different perspectives? I think the perspective I was looking for 15 years ago was mine, or it was the people around me who I deemed successful. And, like success looks and feels differently to everyone. I think, by trying to mirror what I was seeing reflected back at me by those people around me, I think I was missing what I'm good at. And what I'm good at is this, idea of connection. I think, through my recruiting career, we're attuned to asking questions and understanding, what are the things that make you feel good? What are the things that you see around you that help to ensure that you're meeting your goals, or that you've done well in your career, or that, has helped to inform how you viewed failures and succeeded the next time. It's really understanding this idea of why do you do what you want to do? And then I think at some point in time it was, I think the real pivot point for me was I needed someone who believed in these questions I was asking, and that I felt like I could take on this challenge of solving some of these, these problems that I had rolling around in my head, some of which I was still contending with on my own. And, it took an opportunity to really like flex my muscles and see what I could do, under the watchful eye of someone who absolutely and emphatically believed I could deliver on those things. I think that was the huge change for me.
Okay, well let's dive. That's pretty good. Actually, before we dive into your journey, I'm curious what you meant when you said that the key question you're asking yourself is how can I solve my way out of this? What's this? What are the problems that you see?
Oh, it's the thousand small decisions that are in front of me on a daily basis. It's this is not a problem, it's an opportunity. It's a way to look at a problem in a different way today.
Mm-hmm.
And also give myself the grace that I may not have the answer at that moment. I think what age has brought to the table for me is, you're capable enough to figure this out, by either finding the people that can help you look at a problem in a different way, or giving yourself some time to figure it out. Like there is, I think too, it's through asking a lot of questions in my career, and being in a position to understand how people do things. I think the most powerful answer is, I don't know, but I'll get back to you. I will find, let me think about this for a second. I want to give this the due consideration it needs, to give an answer. And it's, sometimes that's off-putting, like, oh my gosh, like you basically told me you don't know, but like what confidence and wisdom it takes to say, but I'll find out. I want to do this well, but I can't do that for you right this second. And so it's sometimes slowing down has been, a good reminder for me. So, now it's thinking about that things, even in the mundane tasks in my day, even in the, I am, I don't know, staring at a spreadsheet. I can't quite figure it out. And it's like, I'll shift gears, give myself some pre-thinking time, and then reapproach this. I think giving myself some time and the opportunity to do something else, I think the answer will come to me. So it's giving myself the grace, but also the opportunity to think I'm capable of finding a way, through this problem. And I, feel confident that I can find a solution to it, but, I just need a second to do it. So, but Abby 15 years ago would never have done that. It was, either running from a problem entirely or bulldozing my way through it with, limited, limited thought.
I like this. It feeds right into the fixed versus growth mindset. I really respect Carol Dweck's work on the notion of what a growth mindset is. I have a slightly different definition, very much influenced by her, which is the belief in yourself that you have the ability to overcome any obstacle that comes your way. It's not that obviously the fake growth mindset is, I can do everything, blah, 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 whatever. Or the fixed mindset is, I'm good at these things, I'm terrible at those things, so therefore I'm never going to do those because I'm just terrible at it. Those are fixed mindset attributes. But the belief that you're able to overcome any obstacle that comes your way. And part of the solution, as you just said, is doing what sounds like it's been a little bit more of a minefield for you in the past, which is get other people to help out, get other people involved who can help.
Yeah, and I think what it's also done is it's endearing. I think it's, I know I can be naturally charming. It's sort of one of the things that I've gotten older. I've heard enough times that it's nice to hear. But I think, that as well as being authentic and asking for help or asking questions about things I may not have expertise in. I think people understand that, through that they share in the solution, they share in the success. And then it creates this, culture of people willingly being collaborative with one another. And then, on top of it, like, this people and culture leadership career is really materialized in the time of people being remotely based. And so then it became this additional layer of complexity around how do you create these intentional opportunities for people to collaborate when we don't see each other. Like, we have to schedule time in a calendar, or someone has to be at their computer answering a Slack message, or there has to be some opportunity in a meeting where we encourage, people to speak up and collaborate. How do we do these things? So it's invited these really interesting applications for this idea that allow for me to do this at work while also still doing it myself. And so it's sort of seeing this play out in real time in front of me in ways that I could have only imagined, as a professional starting out a long time ago. So it's been incredibly gratifying from that standpoint. Just like the curious part of me is, really, I don't know. It's cool. It is very cool to see this play out in my professional life with people who I have great respect for.
Yeah, I'm hearing that. Even just the way that you shared that, you were referring to how can we make sure there's still connection? How can we continue to make space for this? How can we continue to do this even though we're all remote? As opposed to, I suspect most businesses, I don't know the number, it would be a very high percentage, let's say, where their focus is how can we kind of make do with what it is while we're in this temporary situation? Like, how can we kind of just like get through it? Yeah. Or we're not able to do it anymore, so we're just gonna have to live with it.
Yeah.
So it's a different approach. All right, well, let's shift gears. Let's focus on like what have been some of like the most pivotal moments that have led to your success, or that have led to what you're now defining as success?
I'm probably motivated a whole lot by failure. We have this running joke in my family. So I'm a twin, and we're different enough in that, I think my sister is, and I'm actually one of 8 kids. So there's this like massive kids in my world, but I'm closest with my twin sister. But, when I look at her professional career, it's a heads down workhorse mentality. She's incredible. And, honestly, she's held the exact jobs I have had in my career and done like far better at it than I have. Like, she's got this resilience and just this like absolute persistence to deliver in a conventional way. Whereas I am, I'm not risk averse. I think, I really love the idea of taking these like professional risks and sort of seeing if things work. And I think the reason startups have sort of worked for me is because it matches that element of my personality, that I love trying things on for size and creating where it didn't exist. And there's this degree of chaos, and failure to some degree is sort of expected. So everyone, has this assumption going into it. But I think, there have been, lots of times in my career where I think, that boldness has been, perhaps abrasive, or it's been, mistimed. There is a time for, measured approaches. There is a time for, calculated risk taking. There is a time for softness, as it relates to my line of work. And I think, sometimes like, I've gotten a little ahead of myself with wanting to do things when I wanted to do them, how I wanted to do them. Mm-hmm. So I think there's been definitely some instances in my career where this has played out in a way where I'm like, gosh, like, I think I came out a little too strong that time.
Can you give an example of it?
I've probably, expressed, I'm trying to think of times where this hasn't worked out. I think, there's this like element of being, like things being just and fair. And, I think I've probably been, very open with sharing feedback, with, people who I've worked for and those around me, and being, very like clear in that this cannot be done this way. And we should do it this way. I'm trying to think of examples of this. Or if I feel like, the approach isn't authentic, or, that, perhaps like my client group was going to be on the losing end of this strategy. Like, candidate experience was going to be the collateral damage of this decision. And it was, we cannot like wreck our reputation in the candidate marketplace because we've made this business decision that absolutely pulls the rug out from that. Like things like that. Like I'm very, I guess I don't shy away from confrontation in that way. So I've probably had some...
Not when you see that's unjust or unfair.
No, no. And so I think, I've definitely had some very charged conversations that, may not have it sort of missed the mark in knowing, is this the right time to have this? Is this the hill I want to die on? And is this the audience with whom it's appropriate to have this discussion? Like, there is a different way to do this. There's a solution here that where everyone can stand to win. This is not the way to do that. It becomes like adversarial and creates tension across the team.
Is
So,
is an example of that, challenging a superior or a supervisor or employer, or even senior leadership in front of everyone else to make sure that you're the one who's seen defending all the people, because you got to defend the people, and then you go a little bit too aggressive or you cross the line a little bit too much, and then they kind of dig their heels in even more, and then nothing changes. Is that an example of that?
I mean, I think, there's, now that you say that, so I worked for a startup years ago, and, it was very clear that we were struggling with, how we were positioned in the marketplace. Like, I don't know that our platform was as mature as we led our clients to believe. And, we invested a lot of time and energy into hiring all of these people to join the team to support this platform that, was very clearly not hitting the mark. And then on top of it, it was very clear that we were going to have to, readjust our go-to-market strategy, which meant, different sales targets or different sales audiences, rather, different sales profiles. So were we going to go direct selling or partner selling? Like, it was very clear in this town hall meeting that we were struggling mightily to meet the demands of our clients. And then I felt that our entire employee team could see this. Like, it was very clear to me, we are being sold, snake oil here. And so I said, I think I said something effective. This doesn't make any sense at all. Like, none of this really lands in a way that makes any sense to any of us here. Something to that effect, like absolutely calling this out. And I remember having a conversation with our chief product officer after the fact, and I think he was surprised by this, and nothing came of it. But I think thereafter half the company was laid off, within the next month, and so there was some sense of validation I felt in the moment, but at the time it was what was I hoping to glean from all of this? Like, what happens here? If I say this thing, it doesn't change anything. It's created confusion. It's now shined a spotlight on this, big glaring miss in our organization, but it doesn't create opportunities for collaboration. It doesn't put people in a mindset to say, we've got this, big problem in front of us. How do we solve our way out of it? How do we create these opportunities to create a win here for everyone? Really, it was just me.
If you were able to go back into that moment now, and you're at this town hall, and everything that you know now, right? You've already got you've got the additional years or maybe decade of wisdom and experience now, and parenting and leadership experience as well. And you go back into that moment, and you're gonna do something. Maybe. What do you? Or you're about to get up and go, we're selling snake oil and this is terrible, and you're lying to everybody and this is horrific and this is unfair, and you're about to get up and do something. What would you do?
I'd like to think, with a decade of wisdom under my belt, I'd like to think, if I were to stand up and ask a question, it's, how can we as a team move forward? What are we in a position to do today in order to do X, Y, and Z? Something that was more solution oriented, instead of being someone that very clearly is good at identifying a problem. But that doesn't do any good. The only way out of this is through it. Mm-hmm. How can we meet the moment? How can I, because what I've realized now with my role is, it is my job. I often say to CEOs that I work with, and it is not my job to understand the vision. I amplify it. My entire role here is to amplify exactly what we've settled on as our mission. What are we trying to deliver here? And how are we trying to deliver those items? Like, what's our, sort of value-based system in doing that? And so in doing this now, I'd like to think I would look at it through the lens of, how can I create a solution-oriented call to action to the people of this company, because they look to me to be someone who's sort of the heartbeat of the organization. I'm sort of this live wire of emotion in that way of sort of, being very attuned to how people are feeling and how can we capitalize on, feelings of fulfillment, of satisfaction, of impact, of feeling like we're doing this great work, but also doing my best to make sure that we hear and validate those who are feeling frustration of concern, but reframing those things in a way that still puts us on the right track.
Yeah, okay. And what could you imagine that you would have done differently? Would you have still stood up in that meeting and kind of called out what the problem is and start giving solutions? Would you have gone to the chief product officer afterwards? Would you have spoken to people individually and tried to find out what they're looking at? What?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't have, I wouldn't have stood up and said anything in that meeting. I think, it becomes a grassroots effort to understand, how is the team feeling? And people are not going to share that kind of feedback in a public setting. It's best done on one-on-one conversations. It's understanding the sentiment of the organization as a whole. And, part of this is anonymous feedback. It's, things like pulse surveys or engagement surveys that we do from time to time to understand. But, it's also engaging with people one-on-one and understanding, how are you feeling right now in the work you're doing? What sort of things should we be aware of? What are the biggest opportunities for the organization? What are some things you feel are going well? It's a lot of these things that put people in the frame of mind of, this person values my feedback and I have an opportunity to have some sort of impact here with how we move forward from here. So I would absolutely not have stood up in that meeting. I do my best work on a one-on-one basis. Is what I've realized.
Yeah, that sounds powerful. You're talking primarily about reorienting the conversations towards solution. Like, yes, identifying problem. Most people can't even identify a problem to start with. When people come up to you with a suggestion all the time, they're probably just giving you the solution. It's like, wait, what's the problem that you've got the solution to? Tell me what the problem is, right? And you're talking about just making sure that others are able to share ultimately what's most, like, how they're actually feeling and be able to be validated for it. And then to be able to, what you're hoping that gives them the opportunity or helps them feel like they have the opportunity to share their ideas to potentially create more solutions.
Yeah, it's sharing their ideas. In fact, I had this discussion with one of my colleagues earlier today. We're talking, a lot about calibrating performance and performance management. And then you start to think of, like, how do you do that? What are some things that we're thinking about as we do this? And the one part of this is performance. It's the obvious, like, role-related types of things that people do as part of their job that are on a job description that, very clearly define success. There's this other part of it that's more potential focused, and it's really, are these people attuned to, identifying solutions when they don't have to? Are these people who, are of service to those around them? Are they putting themselves in a position to be a mentor to others? Even when they don't formally have any reporting relationships? Are they displaying things like intellectual curiosity? Are they looking at things holistically and helping the team move forward, even if it's beyond their role? It's how we sort of define high potential employees. So it's a lot of these things. How can we encourage people to think in that way? It's thinking in this way that is more, probably, what's the word? You've got kind of like a visionary leader. It's challenging the people around us to think, I'm giving you a chance to think bigger here. We've got this thing that you've identified. What do you think? What do you think? Help me understand how you might work through this. What would you do? What can you do to have any sort of impact in moving forward within, the people around you, within your team, within adjacent teams? So it's affording people those opportunities. It's giving people agency, is I think what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, okay. Agency to solve the problem, or agency to come up with the ideas that can potentially solve the problem?
Both. And that's, that's what I love about working in startups, is both of those things can be true at a company like ours. We often have the visibility to see things beyond the bounds of our own departments. So the ability to identify, solve, but also have the opportunity to work collaboratively across department lines across an organization, even as far up in the organization as the executive team to help solve these things. We often rely on everyone in an organization to, solve a problem.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. It's the startup mentality. It's a
Yeah.
valuable message, probably for everyone to learn. I mean, but even still, in a larger corporate, it still makes sense for people to be able to have that perspective.
It does. What I haven't been able to crack, the challenge for me is, chain of command is strong. There's siloed approaches in larger organizations. There's bureaucracy. There are political headwinds at larger organizations, and the pace of change is just slower. So you've got to have some serious resolve to be able to, employ this mindset at that scale. And I'm certain it can be done. I think, I look at the kind of leader I am and the kinds of teams and the kinds of people I like to work with. And, I do think, my skill set just falls better in a startup world simply due to the pace and scale and size. But yeah, I'm sure you're right. It can be done. It just takes, a much different approach.
I remember this is while I was at a large bank in Australia, a large corporation, and there was a team event. We went away for a weekend or whatever it was, for 2 nights, and we had these kind of work team stuff which is going on. And this was in a place where we were all working with high net worth clients who are all revenue producers, basically. And the manager was asking, one of the leaders was asking, okay, so tell me, like they were trying to be very engaging with the team and like, come on, let's be cohesive, and said, tell me what needs to be fixed. What's wrong? Like, what's the worst part about your job here? Like, ask that type of question, like thinking that asking that means that you're showing vulnerability and that able to engage other people. And it was, she regretted it very quickly because it was silence, dead silence. No one wanted to say anything. And then she's like, come on, someone. And then finally one person said, he was pretty senior in the business, or had been around for quite a while, and a high revenue producer. He basically just said, I feel like I'm a battery in a massive machine, and as soon as I'm drained out, you're just going to chuck me away, and then just replace with someone else, with another battery. And then she's like, and it's time for morning tea. Like, she just didn't know how to engage with it. Like, had a bit of a conversation about it, and then other people kind of like nodding along, and then she felt intimidated by it. And so I think it's great that you're sharing. It's like, great, give people agency, get people to come up with what the problems that they're facing and all that kind of stuff. But how do you do it the right way so that you don't end up in that type of situation, especially if you're relatively new in the organization and you're trying to create change or enact change? Like, how does that happen?
I mean, change is hard. I think, part of this is like, there is a home for that kind of conversation that, this person had with your team. There absolutely is a place for this, but, the environment has to be cultivated. It has to be created in a way with thought and care. You've got to have a group of people who are ready to receive that message. And you've got to have a group of people who are ready and willing to give it, even understanding what repercussions might come. There's got to be a safe environment created. So I think when you think about how this is done well, part of this is leadership is not just driving toward OKRs. Again, it's coming back to the same idea that we employed in recruiting. You have to understand the motivations for why people are doing the things that they want to do. You have to create an environment that gives people, matches the ask with how people, are attuned to solving that particular challenge or problem. In that case, it's, I think about, asking what's wrong, like, how, like creating an environment where, like thinking about this, it's like, has the leader endeared themselves to the team? Have they created those opportunities to give people, not visibility, give people the opportunity to, like have wider impact, to have a wider audience? Have they, advocated for them and their work? Have they, had these opportunities of intentional leadership beyond, like standard driving toward goals? I'm trying to think of how I can explain this in a way. I feel like I'm getting off track here. It's, this level of advocacy and trust and support. It's all of the things that we employ with our friends around us every day. You think about the successful relationships you have with your friends. Those are born of, like, again, reciprocity. It is, trust. It is, seeing us at our highest highs and lowest lows. And the relationship never falters. Things might change slightly with the approach, but, there's still the constant of, trust and reciprocity. As a leader, it's not all that different. It is not all that different. There has to be some rapport with the people you meet. I feel like I've got an idea of how I want to answer this question, and I'm just not getting there.
I mean, if we stick with the friendship metaphor, I mean, the other two things, you've got to have value alignment and objective alignment as well. Like, what do you both want from the relationship, and what do you both value in your own lives that the relationship can bring more of? And then I guess when you couple that, or those two aspects, with what you're referring to of trust and reciprocity, like people working together and trusting that they can rely on the other person to work with them, is that kind of like all the key ingredients, or is there something else that needs to happen in an organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in an organization, there's other ingredients here, because it's different. It is different. Like, friendship and a work environment are different because there is also a goal you need to achieve. Like, there's a set of things of output that you have to deliver on. And so there is this, sense of, there has to be, like, shared accomplishment. There has to be, gosh, I'm sort of dancing around this idea in my head and can't articulate it, but, it is, I don't know. Let me give this one some thought.
You just did what you said you learned how to do over the last 15 years. Good job.
I know. I do. And this is exactly it. This one needs due consideration. There is this element here, because I don't want to draw this straight line comparison between friendships and, working with our colleagues and getting the best of the people on your team. But, and you're right, there is this objective and value alignment here, but there is this, there's this, it's a leap of faith. Like, there is this objective at play here. You're all driving toward this, but there has to be this safe place to try things out, this, safe ideation space. There has to be, just a lot of trust. Yeah, I'm gonna do the thing. I'm gonna give this one some thought. Let's come back to this one.
Let's come back to it. I mean, in a similar vein, we've discussed previously about the parallels between leadership and parenting. Do you want to share some of the things you've learned from parenting that have then taught you how to become a better leader?
Yeah, I think, the number one thing is this, level of humility parenting has brought to my life. I think, much like before I ever led teams or, was in a position to decide on a direction for a department, I think I had these ideas of what I would do. It was emphatically believing that I would never do this, or I would absolutely do this, or I would show up in this way, and as I learned in parenting, my husband and I always laugh, I had, this very strong aversion to my girls, like, having this obsession with Disney princesses. It was, this completely unattainable goal. And, it wasn't the life I wanted for my girls, and thinking that they needed to be, reliant on others to help solve the challenge for them. I wanted them to feel like it was on their shoulders, which is like, what an absolutely ridiculous idea to put forth, like, in my mind for a 1 and 2 year old. And so
You're 2 years old, like, never rely on anybody. I get I've got 2 young daughters as well, so I'm with you. Like, I'm with you there in the core of it, right? Like, you don't need to have a boy that's going to come and save you. But I guess your girls are a bit older, right? How old are your kids?
They're 4 and 6, and then I've got a 17-year-old stepdaughter. Okay. And so,
okay,
I think, the goal, and I'm sure you feel the same way about your girls. That's, I want them to feel capable. I want them to feel that they're good enough and worthy. And I'm sure a lot of this is born out of, all the insecurities that, anyone I know is carried around for the entirety of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And wanting to be seen in this world as, as good as, anyone around us, because I think, in generations past, like there's been this huge shift in expectations for women and the kinds of, roles we would hold in lives. And so, I think mine and probably the generation before me, like were the first instances of, being in a position to, to have professional success and really explore that fully. So, I told my husband, I'm like, absolutely not. My girls are not wearing Disney princess merchandise. There will be none in my house. And, lo and behold, it's, of course, it's everywhere in my house. They've seen, probably all the movies by this point, and they love these characters, and it's pure. Like, I think what you realize is your expectations of this thing that you fear, end up showing up in a way I could have never conceived. And I think, when I think about taking those lessons in parenthood, also, I said, my kids will only eat the healthiest foods. And, I probably have the pickiest eater in the history of eaters. And I just laugh at how little I knew. And so I think about those lessons and, how I've now shown up with, the teams that I'm a part of. And, I think what I've now learned is it's okay to say, I don't know. It is not my job to know all the answers. It is my job to figure out how to find them out. And that's through the people that I hire in my team. It's through listening tours and getting to know the people in the organizations I support. It's understanding things like the motivations of why people do the work they do or want to do, or how can we get them to that place where they get to explore those things in the future. So it's sort of understanding, I have little to no control over the outcome here. All I can do is help guide people toward, what they might want to do. And the same goes with my kids. And I think the other thing I've learned is, it's just this, level of empathy. You see, there's such purity in how, kids, go from babies to toddlers and learn things, seemingly on a daily basis at that point. And it's just this absolute wonder and awe of, being a part of that. It's, and I think to some degree, some of that plays out professionally. You hire someone and, you see them develop and grow, and it is our job as parents, and I think as leaders, to help cultivate those opportunities and clear those hurdles out of the way for people to achieve those things. And so I think it's getting out of people's way, and it's not my job to go through the journey. It's just, my job to make sure that the path is clear as much as I can.
How does that specifically apply for you with parenting? Like, especially for your young ones, right? Especially for the 4 and 6 year old, because they're intense years, right? There's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of maturity. Us as parents always want our kids to be far more mature than they're ready to be. But then we also don't want them to be too mature, because we still want them to be dependent on us. Because if they're not dependent, like if they don't need us anymore and they're entirely self-sufficient, then there goes the attachment, and they're not ready to have no attachment. So they'll just find it with their peers or somewhere else. And so you're talking about the purity. I'm not sure exactly what you mean about when you say the purity of, like, from baby to toddler and kind of growing up. But then also you're referring to, like, get out of their way and empathize and support them. How does that very practically, tangibly apply with you with raising kids?
Yeah. And I think when I say purity, it's, watching someone who has no agenda, no ulterior motives, no anything. Like, they're just exploring and figuring things out. They're learning, these new skills seemingly out of nowhere. And so it's just, sort of this awesome opportunity to watch something happen, like purely in an organic sort of situation. But I think in, tangibly as a parent, I think it is, understanding those moments where it is appropriate for me to step in, but also understand when, there is just there's no benefit for me, being involved in the situation. Sometimes as a parent, you have to let things happen as they were meant to happen.
Can you give me an example
I think it's, and I, maybe it's like forcing the issue. Like, sometimes people need to learn things the hard way in order to, work their way through it and understand how to do it better the next time. So, like I'd mentioned, it's, I've got a daughter who is an incredibly picky eater. And, I think for a long time, it was this battle of wills over, you will eat this or you will not eat that. And now is the time for this to, be eaten or not eaten. And like basically thinking if I set enough constraints or rules around this process, that at some point this person will do the things that I want them to do, and then it just becomes, it's an awful, it's an awful situation. It's not changed. And then I think at some point you realize like this will continue to happen or not continue to happen regardless of what I choose to do. Is this the real, is this how I want this night to go? Is this how I want this day to go? Is this how I want to look back at this week and think, the success or failure comes down to mealtime? This will work itself out over time. I think it's just the grace of, we'll figure this out. Today's not going to be that day, or this week may not be this week, or this year may not be this year, but it's offering options. It's offering, different scenarios, but not forcing the issue.
So a lot of people listening to this who have kids are probably freaking out about that because they're hearing, wait, then you're just accepting mediocrity. Like you're accepting mediocrity. This is terrible. You can't be compassionate. A relatively recent podcast episode with a guy named James Kirby. He spent decades on academically studying compassion and practicing compassion-focused therapy in the clinical psychology practice of his own, and has done a lot of incredible work. He wrote a book called Choose Compassion. It's amazing. And I asked him the same question. It's not the case. You can't just it couldn't be further from the truth. Like the criticism and the judgment that people can have as a result of not being able to choose their own path, and so telling them you're terrible, you're making the wrong choice, or you should be doing better than this, or whatever it is, just actually causes their amygdala and the hippocampus to shut the whole system down. I'm curious from your experience, because it sounds like this is something that you've really battled with. You mentioned the word grace, or the value of grace. You kind of mentioned like you don't want to over control the situation anymore, but you really want it to be a particular way because you care and love about your kids, care about and love your kids, right?
Yeah.
How do you balance it? How have you managed to overcome that paradigm or that belief that accepting kids being kids is going to accept mediocrity?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's this idea you'd asked earlier, how do I define success? And one of the things, that I was challenged to rethink, and this is just in the last few weeks, and this applied to work at the time, but now, I probably see this is what I was trying to get at here. Like it's redefining your definition of success sometimes. Like there's not a single definition in any situation. And I mean this to say, like in this instance, sometimes it is not about, this child successfully eating the entire plate of food. Sometimes it's a matter of adoption. Can I get this person to at least try something or move in that direction? Can I make some meaningful step in that direction? So that this person, may not do exactly what I'd intended this to be or how I wanted this to go, but there is some progress. And I think that's something I still struggle with professionally today. And I certainly struggle with it as a parent when you think, gosh, like kid, I've got, 35 years on you. And, but they don't know this. Like in their mind, it's, they have what, they intend to do in this situation. And we have like the luxury of wisdom and knowledge and all of this experience. But sometimes you have to redefine how exactly are we defining success here. All right, fine. Tacos are off the table. This kid is absolutely not going to eat this, but there is still a win here. Like, all right, fine, we're not going to do this. Will you agree to do this? Like it's a negotiation. It is a compromise. It is identifying a win for all people involved. Like how can we both leave this situation feeling as though, we both gained something here. And so it's like employing this at home with my kids because, I think that level of, compassion, of, of nurturing energy, this is like part of the big thing that has informed the work I do every day, because, at the end of the day, it's still, we all have wants and needs. We all have a sense of control we want to have in any situation. But it's not a zero-sum game. There is a way for things to be of value for all involved if we just look at the problem a different way, or redefine the way we think of success at all.
Yeah, and a few things came up for me as I was hearing that. Like this is the example. The two examples have come up, which I'm sharing because anytime I've shared it with parents, they've really resonated. So hopefully it's resonating with whoever's listening to this. The one example is recently my daughter, who's 3 years old, a bit over 3, came up to me with a toy, and she was really upset, and it was broken. It's like it's like an electric keyboard, but it's a small one, which it's attached to some paper, which you can play the tunes as you follow it. And so like it's broken, fix it. I'm like, oh, it's broken. It's not working. Okay, I'll throw it away. And I took it and started walking over to the rubbish bin. And then within about a second or two, she's like, "Wait, Daddy, wait." I said, "What?" She's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm throwing it out because it's broke. You said it's broken, so it's broken." It's like, "No, Daddy, I'll fix it." And she took it, and she came back a few minutes later, and she said, "Look, it's working." I said, "Oh, it's working now. I thought it was broken. What did you do?" And she's like, "I turned it over, and there's this little black thing, and then when you move it, and then it starts working again." She found the switch. Congratulations. I'm like, "Wow, you did it," right? Because like she had complete agency in that moment. Like she realized that if she wants to play with this toy that she really wants, then she's going to have to work out how to solve it. She can't just rely on other people to solve her problems. But the other thing, and I'm still not sure how I properly feel about this, but when we, especially my wife, because she's the better cook out of the two of us, when we prepare really beautiful food for our daughter, and then suddenly she just doesn't want to eat it. It's like, okay, if you don't want to eat now, that's all right, but just know we're only eating as a family. So if you don't eat while we're a family now, and then we take the food away, there's going to be no more food later. Now, a lot of parents are like, "Oh, you're punishing her for not eating and blah, 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 whatever." I'm like, well, not exactly. Like, she's just learning that there's
Giving her the choice.
Yeah, she's got a choice. She's got agency for herself. And then when she is hungry later, she's crying or whatever. I'm like, well, what do you, and give her cuddles. And then eventually it's, what do you want to do about it? I want to go to sleep, or I'm going to go to the kitchen and have my oat milk. Okay, then she can go and do it herself, because she can go and reach it and she can prepare for herself. It's like, well, then you got to take it in, like they've got to take it into their own hands. I mean, in Australia, I imagine pretty much the same in the US. There aren't many kids who are starving or malnourished. There aren't many. There might be more than what would want to accept, but there aren't many. And that's because they never have the food in front of them as an option. It's not as a result of their parents not being convincing enough to make the kids eat the food that they should be eating, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what other lessons about parenting have you learned so far, which clearly bleed over into leadership?
I think it's as I mentioned earlier, it's just humbling. I think I think like every step of this journey has brought different things. Like it's brought a different challenge. And as I was thinking about this too, it's I was reading this book. It's called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and there was this passage I read earlier. And it was talking about this idea of once you've achieved something. So like once you achieve your child sleeping through the night, or once you get to the point where your child can buckle themselves in the car, or once you get to the point where your child is potty trained, it's like, in those moments you feel like you've done it. Like I've reached the pinnacle of parenting success, until you haven't, because the next problem inevitably presents itself. Like something else will come, some other challenge comes to the table. And I think, that's the biggest thing, I can think of, is I've like seen this journey now from, I met our 17-year-old when she was 3. So we've now sort of experienced these teenage years with her, which, brought their own set of difficulties and challenges that I could have never anticipated. And then the same holds true with our 4 and 6 year old, in their own ways, because even when, you solve something in one way with one child, inevitably that doesn't work with the next, and it doesn't work with the next. So I guess it's while you may feel like you've arrived, you've never arrived. Like, it is constant arrival, because you've now done something else, something more complex, more complicated. You've solved, something else along the journey. And I think that's, really informed the work I do, because it is, I think about it the same way as relationships. Like, you date and you think like, oh my, I'm so excited to get married. Like, we're planning this wedding. Everyone's so excited to go. It seems like it is the final destination, the culmination of your relationship. But anyone who's been married now realizes, like, now the hard work starts. It is, the constant calibration of being a partner, and, the game changes, the rules of the game change, the seasons of life are, different, and, people grow and morph and do their own thing. And so, it's really the same with parenthood. It's the same with work. It's never, if you get to the point where you think you've done it, that you're going about it all wrong, because inevitably it will change, and something else will present itself.
I remember reading something from, I think it was Leila Hormozi. Have you heard of? Yeah, okay. She and her husband, Alex Hormozi, they're basically investors in companies with 3+ mil or 30+ mil of revenue, because they've built up some pretty successful businesses themselves. And basically they're now just investors / entrepreneurs in a whole bunch of different companies. And she shared that there's a specific moment when she knew that they're going to lose millions of dollars on their investment in a particular company. She was at the board meeting and the CEO said, I don't know if we want to try these new things you're suggesting. We're pretty comfortable right now. And as soon as she heard that, it's like, well, if you're not outdoing yourself every year, then you're just going to be waiting for competitors to outdo you instead. You got to keep outdoing yourself. And I mean, I guess like it's almost as if it's ingrained in our mindset to have the thought pattern of, when I get there, when I have this, when I get the pay rise, when I get that job, when I do that, whatever, then I'm going to be X, happy or successful or relaxed or calm or feel good about myself, whatever it is. Right? When I get married, then I'm going to be happy. When I have kids, then I'm going to be, it's like, hey, you don't know what the hell's in front of you. But even as soon as someone, like, I've done a lot of finance work with clients. I'm a financial advisor as well. And pay creep is extreme. Like, someone gets a pay rise, and it might be substantial, right? It might be 20, 30, 50% of a pay rise. And no matter what the percentage is, they kind of only notice it for about 6 months. And then after that, it's basically disappeared, because they adjust to the new thermostat or to the new climate. I mean, I guess there are two ways that you manage it. It's either the one side, you just keep hustling and grinding and make sure that you keep getting to the next thing. And then, maybe you'll achieve incredible tangible results. I don't know if that's incredible life results, but incredible tangible results. Or you decide to shift your perspective as to what you're really valuing in each moment, and then hoping that that's going to flow through into different action. And what's that been for you? It sounds like from when you were defining success in the beginning, it was definitely when I get that, then I'll be happy. When I get that new status, new recognition, new validation, or whatever it is, or new pay, then I'll be happy.
It's true. Yeah.
But what's it for you now?
And it's, it's the same idea we talked about before. I've listened to a lot of podcasts, and, it's basically like, podcasts have now become this like self-help book in a 30-minute, type of thing. And it's, things like, how to lead a happier life, or how can, we sort of cure these feelings of insecurity, things like around this idea of how can we feel more happiness generally. And you're right, like pay creep is one of those things where we see this play out professionally, where you think you get to this point and all of a sudden, like, money or titles or status cures all of the things that we struggled with before. But what I found and what I love doing in my work is pairing that with understanding how can we create impact, or how can we create value in this work, or how can we create shared success across the team? How can we create a way for people to see the impact of that success with their client groups, or with, external, partners, prospects, whomever? How can we identify these ways that, that there are shared victories? I think that's, sort of this idea of how can we ensure that money and title is not the only way people are defining success, and maybe that's it. Maybe when I think of how do I define success, first of all, it depends on the situation, but it is giving myself the freedom to redefine it based on, each instance. But I think the common thread that I'll weave through all of this is how can we create those shared opportunities for other people to win with us? And I think that's been really the one thing that's created this level of satisfaction in my career I didn't have. I think it's why when I think of what I want to be doing for the next 40 years of my life, this is the work I want to do, because I've found a way to marry both of those things. Feel like I have the ability to make these to ask these big questions. How can we do these things? Or is it possible that we do X, Y, and Z? And also create those opportunities for people to do so collaboratively. To
Based
create
on
those
the
shared victories.
opportunities they want, right? Like I'm really curious your perspective, because a lot of your LinkedIn posts are focused on basically empathizing with those who have been laid off. We're in early 23. I had to check the calendar. I don't know why I just checked my calendar. But we're in early 23 as we're recording this, and there's the whole debacle with Tesla and Google and Facebook and Amazon, and all these companies are laying off a hell of a lot of workers. And in the long run, I suspect that they're probably going to be looked back on as those are the savvy CEOs of Fortune 500 companies that saw what was coming and made sure their businesses were ready. But then, like, someone like Elon Musk is getting a hell of a lot of flack about what's happening in Twitter and laying off so many people. But at the end of the day, he decided to change the culture, and the only ones who have decided to stick around are the ones who are getting fulfillment from their work by being part of a tech startup vibe with a really high standards, and they want to be some of the best programmers in the world. And that means they've probably found that they're in the right company to be able to do it, where they probably wouldn't have those opportunities before. I'm really curious how you balance out the culture change that's required, or the impact of the culture change that's required, which is giving more fulfillment to some staff and employees, but it's laying off a whole lot of others because of a whole range of different reasons. I'm just really curious your take on Twitter as an example, but as a representative of what happens in other companies as well.
I think there's a lot of facets to this. I don't know that it is strictly a culture versus, values versus performance, sort of conversation. There's a lot of other things, but as it relates to organizations like Twitter, for instance, I think, there are people that will see value in that vision. They will identify with the sort of objectives that have been laid out, with the values that have been put forth. And so what Elon has done has made an intentional, he's basically decreed that's the value. Those are the values and the culture of Twitter moving forward. And there will be people that align with those things and feel like this is a company that embodies the things that are meaningful to me. And there are those people that are impacted by a reduction in force for a variety of reasons. And there will be those people who will willingly choose to leave because it no longer aligns with those values. And I think it's a complicated discussion when you think of the motivations for all of those people involved. But, I think we'll look back at this time too. And I think, someone had mentioned to me, instead of like the great resignation, or, we're in the midst of the great realization. And I think, what people have gone through over the pandemic is that, we sort of understood, or asked ourselves rather, what are my values, and what are the things that I found to be important to me in the work that I do? And, if this were to end tomorrow, what's the legacy I want to have, and how do I want to show up in the world, and what does that look like in terms of impact, and how do I move forward during this time where, things feel fragile. And so I think there was that piece of things. And then we had this great resignation where people are acting upon those things. It was, the balance of power had shifted into the hands of candidates, and people were able to explore those values and explore aligning with companies that felt like they, spoke to them in that way. And I think now it's, so we've now swung from both extremes, and we're now coming back probably somewhere in the middle of this great realization that, there is what candidates want and what organizations want. And, as is the case with most scenarios, the truth is always somewhere in the middle. And I think we'll sort of see this iron itself out over time. But I think it's, we're seeing the pendulum shift back and forth between those two extremes. And we're sort of seeing this, level out at this point. But I don't know. It's an awfully complicated talent marketplace right now, and it's difficult to watch. I really do empathize, because it's hard to watch the people of these organizations go through these instances where it feels hard, and it feels like you're questioning your worth, and the market is attuned to marching on, and it feels like you have been left behind. But I do also believe, as I'd mentioned earlier, that those perceived failures are often the greatest times of growth, that there is this opportunity to re-examine values. There's an opportunity to re-examine, are you in the right kind of role? Is this the kind of work I want to be doing? It's an opportunity to ask yourself some of those questions that you may not have given yourself the time to ask, or you've been, now is the time you're being forced to think about those things. So I do think there's an upside here. It's awful. I have great empathy for it, but I do think there's some opportunity for upside.
So someone listening to this, and let's just say that maybe they've already been made redundant, or they've been one of the reductions in workforce, or they've just realized, like what you realized 10, 15 years ago, no, I'm not in the right place. This can't be forever. And they're listening to this and they go, wow, okay, Abby's kind of sorted this out, right? Like not entirely got it all sorted, but she's on the right track. She's clearly made some much more intentional decisions, and she's made those decisions while going through 2 bouts of maternity and raising a 3-year-old stepdaughter into a 17-year-old, and all of the challenges that come with it, right? And your marriage and everything else that you're responsible for, and your own passions and your own learnings. And someone's now listening to this and they're thinking, I got to be more purposeful with my work. Like, I got to do something different. I know I can't keep doing this for the next 40 years or the next 30 years or even 20 years. What do you suggest that they start doing to clarify both if they should change their circumstances versus changing their perception and their view, and what can they do to start moving in the right direction, like tangibly taking the steps to move in the right direction? What words of wisdom would you share with them?
I think there's great power in vulnerability. I think in those instances where I found myself in their same shoes, I think it was cathartic and powerful to share and give like a name to what I was feeling with the people in my network. And I think, first of all, it was like a trusted group of people around me, and feeling those big feelings, because it's a lot. Like, I think, in the immediate aftermath of those scenarios, it is, probably anger. It's incredible sadness. It is, can I find a position that, 1, will hire me, 2, will bring me work that I even like doing? Like, it's a lot of these like existential types of questions. And then once you're in a position to move beyond that, I think what I tried to do was find people in my network that, I admired. I saw these things that were complementary to what I brought to the table. I admired them for, being in the type of organization I wanted to be a part of, like a startup, the intrigue of working at these companies that I've really fell in love with, and allowing for myself to explore those things. I now had the time. So explore it, like give myself the chance to put myself out there in that way of saying, hey, like, tell me more about this thing. What do you think? Can you help me understand, like, the scope of working in an organization like this, or, this type of work. And I moving into this role, one of the people that I ultimately did that with was my former boss, who was at that company that I stood up at the town hall and sort of, very abrasively expressed my opinions. But this is someone I came to really respect, and I think the tone of our conversations came to be, how did you get to this point? What were the things that you did? Asking for ways to make those meaningful steps in a career that I think I thought I could be good at. But you needed someone to believe in you. You needed someone to give you some glimpse behind the curtain of what it really looked like. So, it's vulnerability. It is setting up conversations with people in your network. It is, like leaving no stone unturned. I think every conversation is an opportunity. And, one of the things that my dad would always say to me was, never turn down an interview. You just never know what will come of those conversations. So it's being open for opportunities, staying open to opportunities that are beyond, the kinds of things you might want to do. So it's openness, it's vulnerability, it's putting yourself out there. It is, most of all, being patient, because even when I think about this particular search, so I'm now at Render, previously I was at a company called Solvi working for a CEO. When I talk about this idea of working for someone that believes in you, I mean, I've said to him a number of times that he changed my life, and he did. He changed the entire trajectory of my career by taking a chance on someone who was rather untested in this kind of role. And, through that work and even in my, performance review, one of the things that he'd said to me was, I think I believe in you when you don't believe in you. And it was this power of finding someone in your network that, regardless of how you may be perceiving, how you show up in the work you do or how you think you're doing, is always there to encourage and trust that you're on the right path. And it was powerful, like the confidence I felt in the work I was doing, the trust I felt to do this kind of work. And, when we were ultimately acquired by Zoom, and the, scope and type of role I inherited just changed mightily, I think I felt this great not failure, it was grief. I felt this huge sense of grief that this role that I loved, this person I loved working for, this boss that I felt really gave this level of empathy, of thought and care to the people around him, and still does, that I'd never find it again. I think it was, how could I possibly be that lucky again in my career? And it was hard. It was a very hard, probably 4 months of time trying to figure out, how can I put myself in this position to be able to do this work again? And so, even if it seems like, I've figured it out, or I've navigated my way to this, to this type of role, that I've, been a parent and been through some trials and tribulations with them. We've never arrived. And I know that. I mean, I feel that every day, even today. It's patience with the fact that the things that were challenging are still challenging for me. It still takes work. It still takes attention. It still takes, constant vigilance over how I'm doing, and really being honest with myself about whether I'm working toward those things at all. It is constant growth every day. And so what I would say to people is, you've really got to give yourself some grace in how you approach this process, because it is work every day, just like every meaningful relationship in our lives. It's work every single day.
Yeah. And that's like a redefinition of work for you. It doesn't mean that just because it's hard work doesn't mean that it's bad. Doesn't mean that it's something to avoid, or that's something that it's going to have to drain you. If there's a purpose behind it, then you can pursue it.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. There's something which I want to touch on from what you just shared as well. Like that's the part where you really started talking about mentors. You mentioned two specifically, your ex-CEO and also your previous boss at the company where you had a learning experience. I guess we can call it that. I mean, the purpose of this podcast is to bring mentors to individuals. That's why you're on here, right? People who are listening to this can be mentored by you as well. Are those the two main mentors that you've had in your life?
I probably opened myself to the idea only in the past few years. I think I always knew I needed someone in my life. I don't know if I knew what complementary skills or what I would need to look for in a mentor. So I think in the past 5 years, yes. But I certainly hope they're not the last. It's just they're the two I've admired the most. One because the woman whom I worked for at that organization a long time ago, who's now a dear friend of mine. It's really great to have someone who's in a position who's now in a position similar to hers, and it's great to understand like challenges and how we navigate through those things, and being able to talk with someone who can help guide those discussions and guide that solution minded thinking, because she's done those things. And I also really love her level of vulnerability and showing up in the work that she does. I've always really loved that about her. And I think, when I think about my former CEO, this is someone who I aspire to be. Like on every human level, it's someone who never stops displaying these characteristics that I just find are of such value to the people around him. Like I joked with him at one point in time. I said, I would walk over burning hot coals barefoot for you. And I would, because he would do the same for absolutely everyone around him, to the point where, my former organization, Zoom, announced some layoffs yesterday. I think they, ultimately laid off 15% of their workforce. And, some of my former colleagues were affected. It was a hard day. It was hard seeing them, put these posts on LinkedIn that we've all grown accustomed to seeing. And, it just hits a nerve. It hits, it makes me feel terrible for these people that I've found so capable and just do great work. And so he had taken the time, not just to respond to each of these posts, but to give that such depth, such thought, very specific examples of the specific value that these people brought to the table, in interactions that he'd had, in the work that they'd done, encouraging them to, continue to do that work. It's what I've always admired about this person, and why people continue to work for him time and time again. I could only count myself as so lucky to be able to have the opportunity to work with this person again, simply because of the way he works with the people around him, the level of care and respect and empathy he has. And so, for him, it's again, he's the kind of person I aspire to be. So when I look at my mentors, I've got one who is navigating the same journey, trying to figure out the same kinds of challenges that I am today. And the other is, if I could be 50% of this person as a leader, I'm doing a hell of a job. And I just admire him incredibly.
I love that. It reminded me of that post probably sometime last year, of the crying CEO. It got a lot of
Yeah.
views. Yeah, you remember? Basically, like a CEO crying because he just had to lay off a whole bunch of people and he feels so bad for them.
Yeah.
I mean, great. It's great that you're being vulnerable and sharing your experience. But there's something about it which just isn't entirely authentic. And I think that people can tell that, right? They can feel it. But also he's just talking about himself. It's not going on, like, this is what reminded me from what you were sharing. He's not going out there on the LinkedIn and making a new post every day about the value of each of the employees that he's been forced to, or that he feels like he's been forced to let go of. Like, imagine if he did that instead. He would have had so much praise. Like, if he just went through and every day he just made a post about, this is a person who, if you don't know this person yet, you got to find out. You got to find out about them. They've done this, 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 and this. And in my company, they were incredible for these reasons. If I wasn't forced to because of business requirements and the economy, then I would keep them forever. And I look forward to hiring them again. If you know anyone who, or if you or anyone else wants to hire someone like this, get in touch with them. They're incredible.
Right.
I imagine if they just did that every day.
Right. And that's what this person did. Like, this was not a one-off, for the purposes of visibility and my network, I'm going to appear as this leader. Like, this is the kind of person that was intentional about creating opportunity for everyone around him. Again, it was creating, his definition of success was creating opportunities for others to be successful. And when I think about like the kind of person, the kind of leader I'd love to be, it is exactly that. It is this idea of shared success through creating opportunity. And it's, maybe in some level it's selfishly driven. Like, sometimes I wonder, like, is this, with the Taylor Swift song where it's, narcissism disguised as altruism? Like, is this, then I start to worry, like, is this a reflection of the people doing those things? And this is not him, but then you start to worry, like, am I trying to create these opportunities because, it becomes like a pyramid scheme of success? Like, then it gets, but, I look at this person and it was always so authentic. It is so authentic. And that's the sort of model I'd love. It's what I hope my legacy is. It's what I hope, my friends see in me, is this person who's driven to create these opportunities for those around me, who's authentic about wanting to, to do those things. And I think, what is a better life than that? What is a better life than having someone look at you and think, this person would give me the shirt off their back, but also, I trust and know that they'll do these things in return without question. I think when I look at my life, it's how do I do these things in both my personal and professional life? Is it possible to do that? I think that's the sort of challenge I've put forth for myself in these past few years. Is it possible to live a life with those values? And so I'm going to try.
Well, I don't even hear you asking, is it possible? I hear you asking, if it's possible, how do I do it?
Yeah.
Which is different, because a lot of people start asking themselves, is it possible that I could live that type of life? And then they go, yes or no. Oh, maybe, probably not. I don't know. But you're not going, is it possible? I don't know. Maybe I just shouldn't even try. You're going, I'm going to assume it's possible. And then I'm going to take action to try and make it happen. Back to the growth mindset, right?
Yeah.
That's
exactly right.
I think final stream or rabbit warren that we dive down is well-being in the workplace. It's a topic that's becoming a lot more prominent. Right? How do you care for your employees through the challenges they're facing in their personal lives, as well as the challenges that they're facing while they're actually at work, like the stress and the anxiety and the frustration, and then obviously developing them and the skills and the like to be able to help them cope with it all too. Like, how do you, is well-being something that you're responsible for in your role? Okay. Yes. And how do you approach it with your team?
Well, first, I'm glad this has even become a topic of conversation. And I think, I can't help but like think a lot of my motivating factors are, in large part due to the pandemic, and one of the silver linings of this is that we realize that there is this huge mental toll of the work we do, how we do it, where we do it. It's this, constant calculation of meeting all of the demands in our life. Like, me as a parent, but, others with, taking care of their home or being, a good son or daughter, or, being a good friend or a partner or any of these things. It is, I often say my own life feels like a house of cards every day. And it is such a delicate balance for it all to go well. Like, you take any one of those cards out and it just crumbles. And so, I think about the pandemic and how it shined this light on, again, fragility and mortality and, all these big things that didn't feel like they had any place, at work for a very long time, at least not in my career. And so when I think about that now, it's really ushered in this era of talking about, well, what is wellness? When we think about this, like, is it just giving employees an outlet to call into an employee assistance line, and find a therapist, like, for 3 free sessions? And it's like, well, I mean, it's more comprehensive than that. There's more to it than that. So it's invited this discussion around, as it relates to parents, like, gosh, like, there are parents who are struggling to conceive it all. Like, when we think about wellness, could it include a definition where we're supporting people through their fertility or adoption journey? It's like, gosh, like, these questions never came up when I first started my career. In fact, like, if we even talked about children, there was a concern whether you were more family minded or if you were more focused on your career. Like that's the transition we've made. And so when we think about this, like in terms of parents or mental health or all of these things, there's been this gigantic seismic shift in how we approach this. And so, I think part of it is understanding the people at our organization and the kinds of things they might be thinking about facing. Again, part of this is asking them. It's this idea of we want feedback as part of this process. If we're, if everything is a directive, then we've really missed the mark on being people leaders. And
unless you
the
get
other,
lucky and just happen to get it right. Yeah.
whew, then you're still doing it wrong, but I guess good. There's some benefit here. So it's understanding the population of people you have today, but also that you may have at some point in the future. Like, I think the other benefit to, working in the last, probably 10 years or so is there's been this shift of it being a more employee-centric sort of scenario. So, in effect, like companies are sort of competing for the business of the talent they hire. And so it's now thinking about like, benefits offerings or work from home or working remotely offerings. It is, all of these things that, again, we didn't think about, 20, 30, 40 years ago. We were not competing for people to work at these organizations. So there has been this benefit here. So there's that part of it. There's just sort of the shift of the last, few decades or few years and the pandemic to think for this. But, I think the other part of this is it always comes back to intention. It is, what is the value of a people function to an organization? What exactly are we trying to bring to the people of this company? And how can we, embrace, that there are people here that may work here for 40, 50 hours a week, 30 hours a week, but they've got an entire other half of their lives that we'd be remiss not to think about. And so, I think it's just a realization that there's a lot more at stake here than just the work being done. So it's really informed, certainly the last few companies I've been at. But it is thinking more broadly around what wellness is, what it means to the people of an organization, and how to create this, very holistic strategy there with that in mind.
So what action do you take once you've identified it, right? You've identified the challenges that people are facing. You've identified this is a way that you're going to be able to attract talent and take care of people. And I guess you almost create a culture of the types of things that your staff will need, because people will be attracted to the talent will be attracted. The talent that needs help in those areas will probably be attracted towards it.
Right.
And you're almost creating that culture of, hey, wait, we help our staff through this.
Right.
But I'm curious, like,
you take action, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there has to be something happening on the back end of this. Like we conduct these surveys and, we ask people what is meaningful for you or what types of support would be helpful for you to feel supported and valued in the work that you do. And there has to be some meaningful action taken from that, however small. Like it has to start somewhere. Like, for instance, offering broad-based offerings for, fertility and adoption support. It's, like meditation-specific apps or physical fitness programs or, support for parents who are in need of childcare, emergency childcare. If, you've got a group of parents here. So it's identifying those needs and following through. Again, it doesn't need to be large change, but there needs to be this recognition and validation that, yes, there is something we can be doing, and taking action from there to actually put those things in place. It seems really, I'm making it sound much simpler than it is, but there has to be some step taken in that direction for it to be meaningful.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It needs to be, I'm guessing the person who signs off on the budget is the ultimate decision maker, but the people who make the suggestions in the budget that get signed off are the ones who need to be really in tune with what the employees need, and then finding the solutions that will meet it.
Right. And I think, it's also, it's also reframing the discussion around why is this important? It's thinking about things like it is not just about, like standard business metrics of, top line revenue and, like, the attrition metrics in my world, or these standard metrics. It's understanding, that there are a lot of other things going into these decisions rather than that. It's, understanding, um, there's just a lot more to it than those things. And so it's also thinking about these discussions and framing it in a way of, again, there's empathy, there's compassion. It's thinking about the impact to the people of this organization. I don't know. It always comes back to compassion for me, but yeah, it's thinking about things differently.
Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. I'm curious, off the back of everything which was spoken, I'm gonna ask you in a moment, right after I wrap up, what you wish you could have told your younger self, and what you really want to make sure that you're teaching your daughters. But before we get there, I'm going to do a quick summary of what we've spoken about, like the high level, and then you can correct or add to or remove anything which I'm saying. We're talking about what success is, or how you define it. And the key part of that is driving. It used to be driving towards an outcome for yourself, monetary, like, another status or recognition, or being adored by other people. Basically, I think that was the word you used, adored. I actually used another term, rung in the ladder. And now it's just noticing that those have diminishing returns. So you want to find something. A successful life for you now is that you can do what you want to do, while also helping other people do what they want to do too. Which is making them feel ultimately more fulfilled. You want to make sure that you have more reciprocity in your relationships. You want to make sure that you can be doing what you think, or is your best guess of what you're happy to do for the next 45 years. And you've adopted a growth mindset to make that happen. Like, you believe that there's always going to be a way to solve the problems in front of you. And the main problem which you see all the time is that people aren't feeling connected or appreciated or valued sufficiently. And then when we're talking about some of the pivotal moments in your life, well, broadly speaking, you kind of we got one example out of it, and maybe another of having kids. But there's like that startup town hall session where you stood up and you're like, it needs to be just and fair, and I've got to back up everybody, and I've got to make sure that I'm protecting everyone, and I've got to be the one who's doing that and seen to be doing that as well. And you're like, oh, you look back on it now and it's almost cringeworthy, right? Like, you'd hate for someone to put that into the movie of your life, unless it's very quickly juxtaposed with how you'd actually want your life, like with how well you're doing now, right? And then you've learned that there are better ways to communicate, and part of that is what you've learned from parenting, right? Like the level of humility. And we were talking Disney princesses and only going to eat good food, and I'm sure a million other things. And you found that you don't know, or it's not your job to know all of the answers. You just kind of got to figure it out. Like, you got to help either figure out the answers for yourself, or help your kids figure out for themselves. Don't over control all the time. Just try and be more empathetic and help them feel capable, worthy, good enough. At least that's your focus now. Making sure that you can recognize for yourself that as a parent, you're never arriving at success. Yeah, I'm learning that too. It's something, it's a hard pill to swallow, right?
Yes.
And then when we're talking about leadership lessons, it's pretty much the same thing. You're talking about agency to solve problems. You're saying don't use such a siloed approach. Like, move away from bureaucracy wherever possible, unless you have a huge amount of resolve to make sure you're creating these changes, or you're happy to just accept the way that it currently is. And then we were talking about the commonalities or the parallels between friendship, or what makes a great friendship and what makes a great leader. And we were referring to trust, reciprocity, some value alignment, objective alignment. You can share your accomplishment with each other. And then when what you then added when it came to mentors is that it's not just those things. It's also like a belief. It's a deeper connection. It's a deeper relationship than a friendship or a colleague. They believe in you. They can become great friends or peers who are a few steps ahead. And they have many of the attributes that you want to have for yourself. And it's reciprocal, right? You were giving the example of you'd walk on hot coals for them. And you do that because they'll do the same for you. Or at least you have the belief that they'll do the same for you. And then when we're looking at well-being, which was the last part which we spoke about, it's really, you're referring to what we do, how we do it, where we do it, what are our competing priorities? Work's not just you clock in and you clock out and that's it. There's no such thing as work-life balance, because they just merge, especially with the number of people working from home, but then also just technology, right? Like your spouse or 8 billion other people can contact you at any moment just through your phone. Like you're never just at work unless you got your phone off and you've managed to not think about the other things. As you said, as a leader, like there's no one solution for your organization. You got to understand what your team actually needs, ask for feedback, find out challenges that they're feeling, and then most importantly, take action. And then when we did actually speak about one more thing, we spoke about wanting to be more purposeful, or how you can make more purposeful decisions. And you re-emphasized the point about the power and vulnerability. And you said, if you're just thinking about what you're going to do, just name what you're thinking with trusted people that you're close to. And it's not just like in terms of your thoughts, it's how you feel and what the possibilities are. Find mentors. Ultimately, you referred to them as networks, people in our network, which we admire, and connect with them and find out. And just remember that everything's an opportunity. So be patient and make sure that you're ready for the opportunities when they show up.
Mm-hmm.
Off the back of everything that I shared there, is there something that you'd want to correct or add to?
No, I think, the only thing I would sum up is success is better when it's shared. I think that's the thing I would walk away with moving forward, that I'd love to, see my career defined as. It's my singular goal.
Success is better shared.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you hope that you could teach either your younger self, like if you could go back to younger Abby, and we're not talking 15 years ago anymore, we're talking a few more, and you go back to much younger Abby, and you probably see your daughters, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
What advice do you wish that you could give them that they would hear really clearly?
You're doing better than you think you are. Mm-hmm. I think I would say to myself, and I still would say this to myself, in fact, don't be so hard on yourself. Like it is a long game. It's a very long game. And what seems huge today will be, a blip in the radar of your life. So that's what I would say to myself. A young Abby and a today Abby.
Young Abby, be a little bit less hard on yourself. Go easy on yourself, because it's just one moment, right?
Just one moment. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with our guests and
Thanks.
with our listeners.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate this discussion. It was incredibly thought-provoking, and I'm looking forward to listening to more of these episodes. I think the lessons here are just profound and important. They're really, really important.
Thank you. So I hope you received a whole lot of value from engaging in that conversation. What were the key takeaways for you? What can you schedule in your life right now to make sure that the time you just invested into listening to this exceptional conversation with this amazing mentor and this amazing individual is time that wasn't misused, but was time that you've allocated properly to enhancing your life and improving it? Whatever it is, schedule it now, practice it now, be the successful person you're meant to be, live with purpose.